Dr. Kreeft. Like the Ouija board, can New Age elements open us to the devil? How about the alternative, quote, energy healing therapies, such as applied kinesiology, muscle testing, or tap therapy? What if the therapist says they are Christian, but are using energy therapies on people? Is it dangerous?
Short answer, I don't know. But I know a couple things that are dangerous. One of them is hypnosis in the wrong hands that can soften and open up your mind to all sorts of supernatural influences. Another one is the Maharishi's uh, system uh, that claims to be simply mind training. And it turns out that you're opening yourself once again to Hindu deities. So, general principle here is just use common sense and discernment and start out by being suspicious and look at it. Don't be naive.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to look at some kind of dark supernatural realities and some spiritual solutions to those realities. You just saw a video of Dr. Peter Kraft answering a question related to Ouija boards, etc., how we should think about those things and how should we think about Christians that use those things. I think his response is nuanced, but I want to look at a few things during this video that help us to kind of discern whether or not we're going the right direction with these things. So, specifically with Dr. Peter Kraft, he said that we need to use our common sense and we shouldn't be naive. Okay. So, we shouldn't be naive about the realities that about the reality that there is a supernatural, dark supernatural force within this world, and it can be enacted through certain things. For example, hypnosis is one of the things that Dr. Peter Kraft mentions. So we can't be naive. Now, the second thing he notes is that we have to use our common sense. So if just kind of in your conscience, you hear something or are asked about something or are seeking guidance from something, then is other than what the church provides, I think your common sense indicator should be red flagging, if we can put it that way. So what we learned from Dr. Peter Kraft is to not be naive and to use our common sense. There are some more things, and it's a little bit more nuanced than that, I think. So here is Bishop Barron to provide some other insights.
When I first saw The Exorcist, it wasn't in the theater, but soon after, when it was first on TV, I was completely terrified by it, as I think most people were when they first saw it. I didn't sleep for several nights after I saw that movie. But you know, the second time I saw it, which was in relatively recent years, I was prepared for this, transformation of Linda Blair from cute kid into vomit spewing, cursing like a sailor monster. So I was ready for that. And it allowed, I think, some of the deeper themes of the movie to emerge. And there are some very interesting spiritual themes. Finally, I would say The Exorcist is a movie not about the possessed girl. It's a movie about these two priests. Remember, we first see a younger priest, Father Damien Karras, who's played by Jason Miller. And Father Karras is a rationalist. He's been trained in psychology, I think in medicine too, at some of the finest universities. As the film opens, he's racked with guilt over the way he's treated his dying mother, but he's also filled with doubts about the supernatural claims of his own Catholic faith. Well, to the attention of this young priest comes this extraordinary case of Regan, this young girl, who has a malady so bizarre that it's confounded the best scientists, doctors, psychologists. And Father Karras is now trying to figure this out. And I think some of the more comical scenes in The Exorcist, and there are comical scenes in it, are showing this young rationalist priest trying to make sense of something which is so clearly beyond what reason can understand. It's so clearly a supernatural phenomenon, and yet he's trying to understand it in natural categories. Well, finally, at his wit's end, he calls for Father Lancaster Marin, who's an older Jesuit priest, archaeologist, and specialist in exorcism, played by the great Max von Sydow, one of the really fine actors of the last 50 years. To me, one of the more terrifying moments of that movie is when Marin arrives at the house of the possessed girl, and he walks in the door, and you immediately hear this horrifying animal cry from the girl, Marin, crying out his name. What ensues is a conversation between Marin and the younger priest, and the younger priest is still trying to understand this thing kind of psychodynamically. I think it's revealing different personalities, and the older priest says, no, there's one personality. It's the personality of the dark power. Father Marin also commences to pray, which to that point no one had done in the movie. Finally, someone knew what to do, what they were dealing with. And then, of course, we have these absolutely horrifying scenes when the two priests come into the room to confront the devil in this girl. And we know them now. They become almost cliched as they go through the rite of exorcism, and they do battle, not with flesh and blood, but as Paul said, with powers and principalities. The climax of the movie comes when Father Marin, worn out by these exertions, dies of a heart attack. And then Father Karras, the younger priest, as it were, lures the devil into him to draw the devil out of this girl. The devil comes into him, and then he is thrown out the window to his death. Now, what becomes clear are a couple things. One is the reality of the supernatural. And I think a great virtue of that movie, but even the more minor exorcism movies, is that we see the reality of the supernatural. And the younger priest, especially Father Karras, begins to see that his priesthood is in relation to this dimension that goes beyond what reason can master. The Catholic tradition, they're both Catholic priests, of course, loves reason, reverences reason, loves to use the sciences, psychology, not an either or, but there's a dimension of reality which goes beyond what the sciences can measure. And that's, I think, what the younger priest begins to see. Second thing, I think is very important. Both of these priests are warriors. Both of these priests die in battle. And they die defending a young girl whom they barely knew, but who had been entrusted to their care as priests. The priesthood is this beautiful and powerful and noble calling. The priest is called upon to do battle with the dark powers as they manifest themselves everywhere. That means in sin, that means in human dysfunction. It also means in this supernatural dimension. And the priests are called forth as warriors, and they give their lives as warriors. And I think that's a very powerful reflection on the nature of the priesthood. The very last scene of The Exorcist, I think, is arresting. The young girl has been saved. The devil has been expelled from her by these two priests. And she and her mother are about to pull away from this terrible place where they've suffered so much. But she spies a priest whom she didn't know, but he has the Roman collar on. And she stops the car, the young girl. She gets out, and she throws her arms around the priest. She kisses him. And what it was a tribute to the two men who had saved her. It was a tribute on her part to the priesthood. Now, the rite comes nowhere near the power and artistry of The Exorcist, but it does suggest, I think, the reality of the supernatural, and that's important. And even something of the heroic nature of the priesthood. At a time when both the supernatural and the priesthood are very much under attack, that's not altogether a bad thing.
All right, so let's look at a few principles. If you put the two clips together, from the first clip, we see that we are to use our common sense. We shouldn't be naive. But what we learn from Bishop Barron in the second clip is something like um, our reason won't. Our reason isn't all there is. There is something supernatural that requires a supernatural remedy to deal with the dark supernatural powers. Now, from that clip, the obvious answer is to pray. It's interesting because this young priest who is very, astute, he's very academic. He understands kind of the theological and philosophical side of the faith. It's interesting because Bishop Barron reveals because he can't deal with the supernatural power that when the old head walks into the room, what does he first do? He prays. And so I think it's important to see that when we're dealing with the supernatural, it's not an either or, as Bishop Barron says. It really is a both and. You have to use science, you have to use psychology, you have to use your reason. And I think I'll stop and caveat here that common sense is never, never juxtaposed to supernatural answers. Common sense will lead you to God, it'll lead you to see that He is the only solution. Your common sense will lead you to pray. It'll lead you to find a solution other than just a reasonable scientific one, let's say. And so it's a both and I think that that is so important. We need to use our common sense. We need to not be naive about the supernatural reality. We need to understand that reason isn't all there is. We need to use our reason to get us to the remedy, which is to pray. And then fifthly, it's really interesting, this plot of this film that Bishop Aaron is talking about, but it really does convey a sense that find a clerical authority and tell them. Don't just stay in your own little solitude dealing with some rather, intense, weighty issues that you might be experiencing. You need somebody like a priest to lighten the load for you. You need somebody, not only a priest, but you need a friend to help lighten the load as well. Um, I think that this film is a rather, dramatized reality that points to something that many people experience all the time. In our modern world, there are supernatural influences all the time that influence us, and we go, um, they go unaware. We don't necessarily think about them all the time, and I think that that is, part and parcel to the fact that in modernity we specifically don't believe that these forces exist, and it's really hard to defend yourself against something that you don't think exists. And I think that that is precisely the case. So, how do we use our common sense? And I think when we hear this idea of common sense, we think that common sense is common, and I think it is common, and I think all of us can kind of intuit it and know it. But it's really interesting how often that the mass populace doesn't use the sense that is common. So what is this term really talking about? It's like, you know it to be true. It's your conscience, really. You know that there's something bothering you, bugging you, so you find a solution. Um, I think that is so important that we use. Don't be naive. I think, again, modernity is so naive about the fact of the supernatural, and understand that that reason isn't all there is, understanding that psychology isn't all there is as well. It's like you can't just go to a therapist and it's going to alleviate the fact that you have a demon within you because you messed with Ouija boards or you prayed to a demonic Hindu god or something of the sort. You have to pray, and you have to pray within the context of the church. You have to pray in context of community. You have to pray in context with the hierarchical structure that the Lord has put in place in order to deal with these things. It really is war. And, the clerics are the spiritual warriors and battlers, to create a term there, that deal with these realities day in and day out. So find and seek a solution, maybe not from a secular therapist or a secular psychologist, but from the very institution that God gave to be able to deal with these things in the first place. Just food for thought. I don't think we often, it's not like immediately we go in our head, especially if you didn't grow up in the church, to think, oh, go talk to a pastor, oh, go talk to a priest. But that's precisely what you should do if you're not feeling too good, if things seem a little bit off. Maybe if you're levitating from your bed, for example, would be one example. All right. We could talk about this forever. Let me just say them again. Use common sense. Don't be naive. Understand reason isn't all there is. Pray and find a clerical authority that can pray and help you through something like this. We live in a supernatural world. We live in a supernatural world with dark forces. The only way we can combat those is with the church, whom was given the keys by Peter, and the gates of hell do not overthrow it. Thinking about that verse today. All right, that's all I have for this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Remember that Christianity is Christ. Without him, there is no Christianity. See you in the next one. Peace.